So welcome everyone to this installment of the Conservation Lecture Series. My name is Whitney Albright. I work in the Science Institute here at the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and I help to facilitate the lecture series. Before we get started today, I wanted to make a couple of quick announcements and go over a few logistics. You've probably noticed that you are all muted. That is to help us kind of preserve the audio quality because we are recording the lecture today. And we will post the lecture recording in the next couple of weeks to the Conservation Lecture Series website. The link is on the screen here. So if you want to revisit the lecture or know of folks that maybe had to miss out today but might be interested, please direct them to the recording. As far as flow today, I'll turn it over to our guest speaker here in just a minute, who will talk for about 45 minutes to an hour, and then we'll have time for a dedicated Q&A at the end of that presentation. So if you have questions along the way, I encourage you to type those into the chat box, and I will relay all of those to the speaker once we get to the end of the actual presentation. So feel free to type those throughout as we go along, and I'll kind of keep track and make sure that those get over to Greg. One last thing here, my slide. Please do save the date for our next lecture coming up in October. On Thursday, October 29th, we'll be hearing from Brad Schaefer with UCLA. And that talk is scheduled to take place from 1:30 p.m. to 3. And we will have more details about the talk and also the registration links posted soon to our Conservation Lecture Series website. So please keep an eye out for that. Okay, without further ado, I am very pleased to introduce our guest speaker today, Greg Ira. Greg is the director of the UC California Naturalist program based at the UC Davis Agriculture and Natural Resources Office in Davis. He has a background in environmental studies and Asian studies. He worked for several years in the Philippines, integrating conservation into the context of rural development. And from 2000 to 2015, he served as director of the Florida Department of Environmental Protection's Office of Environmental Education. His current areas of interest include field-based environmental education, volunteer water quality monitoring, tools for addressing culture, inclusion, and equity in environmental programs, and strategic program planning and operations. So please give a virtual welcome to Greg Ira. And with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to you, Greg, to share your screen and get us started.
Thank you, Whitney. Can you all see that screen, or Whitney, you're seeing the screen?
Yes, seeing it now.
All right, great. Thanks, everybody. I want to thank both Whitney and Christina Sloop for inviting me to join you all today. It looks like there's a good group in attendance, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share with this different audience. I've been spending a lot of time doing presentations about our program and how it works, and this is a great opportunity to take a step back and look at our program and why it's important. And so I really appreciate this chance to share with you all today. So I'm going to jump right into things here. I want to start with this brief passage. The land retains an identity of its own, still deeper and more subtle than we know. Our obligation toward it then becomes simple: to approach it with an uncalculating mind and with an attitude of regard, to try to sense the range and variety of its expressions, its weather, colors, and animals, to intend from the beginning to preserve some of the mystery within it as a kind of wisdom to be experienced, not questioned, and to be alert for its openings, for that moment when something sacred reveals itself within the mundane, and you know the land knows you are there. For me, this passage, if I'm to consider myself a naturalist at all, this passage really resonates with me. When I go to a place, whether it's someplace near my home or someplace far away, this idea of capturing a moment in time and having the place revealed to me, it really hits home. Part because I'm a photographer, amateur photographer, but also because I enjoy seeing those unique experiences that I think we've all experienced over the years. I want to thank Barry Lopez for that from Arctic Dreams. I want to start off by taking a look back at the evolution of natural history, if you will. And we'll start here. There are many definitions of natural history. This is one that I think captures some of the most relevant aspects of it as a field to me and to many naturalists. I would add that as a formal field of study, natural history has been the realm of dominant cultures around the world. But as a practice and a way of life, it is the realm of every person who has relied on their senses to understand the world around them. I think a very relevant story today is, as many of you know, the story of Joseph Grinnell and the more recent story of the Grinnell resurvey study. And it's fitting today to see the observations of naturalists that came before us being of relevance and value. Even as we'll see in a second, the field itself is struggling to remain relevant in some cases. But here is a great example where a naturalist clearly understood the value of observations and the description of those observations, not just for himself or herself, but for future generations. And just to kind of recap, in 2018, the Grinnell Resurvey Project published a paper that described the crash in the number of bird species throughout the Mojave Desert. That information is available. I can provide some links to that later. Today, naturalists are making observations that that field notebook you see there is from one of our participants in one of our courses. And they too may have observations that in the future become relevant. These observations have lots of value. We don't often think of them in that sense, but observations were at various times the source of all indigenous knowledge and many scientific advancements in the fields of public health, agriculture, conservation and resource management, and in recreation. These still play a valuable role today in these fields, but probably with less recognition. As I mentioned, the field of natural history has kind of gone through some ups and downs, with the last 50 years been a pretty steady decline until just recently. Many reasons for this, but I think a lot of it had to do, as others have described, that the increasing specialization of biological sciences, the driving forces of grant funding, the decline in herbaria and collection museums, the decline in individuals pursuing PhDs and courses in the field have all kind of contributed to this. But things are changing, and I want to highlight a little bit of what I call the new naturalist. We'll take a quick look at a video here that's a quick overview of the California Naturalist Program, and then I'm going to jump into some detailed slides after that.
So when I first got to So when I first got to Yosemite and the class started and we convened, one of the first things we did is go straight out and start journaling and start sketching, and that was really fun. But it also was a way to be together with people who I didn't know and actually share a point of concentration and observation. And it was really about the things we were looking at more than it was about us.
We spend time creating our project and doing some high-level thinking, but it's so engaging and involved that you want to immerse yourself in it.
At first I thought, oh my God, I don't belong here. I'm just this little artist. What do I have to offer? I mean, you've got master gardeners and geologists and biologists and people with crazy amounts of knowledge.
People who are thinking about the California Naturalist program but aren't sure that they know enough to step into something where the language is maybe more technical than they're familiar with should not be intimidated. A lot of people who are beginners, just curious, interested folks really belong in the California Naturalist program.
One thing that really stands out to me that I learned with the California Naturalist course was an exercise that we went through towards the end of our course where we became an expert on one part of the Yosemite Park. And then we had to teach it to each one of the other students in this course. So we ended up learning 18 different things about the park.
California Naturalist trainings allow people of different backgrounds to come together to set what is the standard for how we talk about the sky, the ground below us, the water that's flowing through our land around us, and how to engage respectfully in a way that we can both receive and give back to nature around us.
The thing is that we all came together with such enthusiasm and we wanted to learn from each other. It was such a fun group.
When I think about California Naturalist, and I think about all of the impacts that humans are having on the world and the things that we're learning at the same time, I think it's important to learn how to tell stories.
So who are the heroes? The heroes are really regular people who are working to help contribute to our knowledge of what's going on in nature. It was this, I did something today. I did something worthwhile for nature.
Okay, so that sets the stage a little bit by giving you a little bit of context about the California Naturalist program, but I want to go into a little more detail here. Today's natural history is kind of reemerging, and it has new influences, new ideas, different forces that are shaping it and affecting it, different audiences that are engaging with it. And I think there's an interesting story that comes from one of the individuals on the slide that you can see now. Just from in the top left is Dina Marinlander, who is a founding director of the California Naturalist program. She's at UC Berkeley, a cooperative extensionist specialist. Below her is Sabrina Drill, who is associate director and then interim director after Adina finished her term. And then on the right is Cameron Barrows, who is the first lead scientist that we've selected and identified for the California Naturalist program, and for good reason. He's also a naturalist and instructor, a researcher at UC Riverside at the Palm Desert Center, and he tells a story of a survey that he did that examined the interest and need for natural history training in early career scientists. and found that only 10% or roughly 10% of them, of the individuals he surveyed, felt their academic training alone provided the needed exposure to natural history. And that got him thinking that this is something that we need to be doing more of to help prepare scientists in all disciplines for making observations in the field, conducting field work. And certainly it contributes to a broader understanding of the work that many people do in their academic pathways that are very focused today. So he's a big proponent of the new natural history. Let's keep going on, and we're going to look a little bit here at who is becoming a naturalist today. And if I had to categorize or kind of profile groups of individuals that are coming into our courses, we really have three categories of people. We have a kind of a young 18 to 26-year-old kind of pre-career young adults who are really in an exploratory or exploration phase, looking at future academic and career paths. We have mid-career professionals, and these are commonly teachers or any professional in any field that is looking for something to do as a hobby, to be engaged in their community, in their local area. And then we have a very large number of what I would consider kind of a category of early retirees, people that are not as busy, have time to spend as volunteers, and are really looking for ways to strengthen their own capacity to be an effective volunteer in their community. And those are really broad descriptions of the type of people that are coming into our courses. On our website, we have a collection of CalNat stories where naturalists that have gone through our program can share a little bit about what they got out of the course. And I just want to share a couple of these stories with you very briefly, because I think they paint a more detailed picture about why natural history and the California Naturalist program is relevant to them. Mary, who was from Sacramento and took the course at the FEA Nature Center, has always loved nature, sort of an amateur naturalist at heart. She saw the California Naturalist course, immediately wanted to take it. And she says that the course really opened her eyes and gave her tools to use to learn more about nature. Mary's gone on to be an incredible naturalist. She actually became for some time an instructor for the course at Tuolumne in Woodland, California, and has just really become a go-to person for naturalists in the Sacramento area for ideas and places to go and observations. I want to highlight one other person, Francis, who took the course at the Salmon Protection and Watershed Network in 2012. He was injured on the job and had some time. He took the course and really got a lot out of the course. He says being a naturalist means continuously learning and provoking critical thought within others and being a jack of all trades. It also means kind of appreciating the intersectionality of nature in its science, art, literature, among many other fields. And he says, nature belongs to all of us, so I'm passionate about delivering programs. He is actually an interpreter for the East Bay Regional Park District, and he incorporates much of what he learned in his programs. He's a great proponent of the California Naturalist program. It's a great partner, and just another example of people that have discovered and have taken the California Naturalist course. So what are some of the reasons that people decide to become a naturalist? We actually survey all of the participants in our courses about this. And the top 5 reasons in order are, 1, to learn about the local environment, their plants and animals in the area where they live. 2, the certification, that pin that you see them holding is kind of the manifestation of our certification in the CalNat program, has a lot of meaning to them. Meeting others with similar interests is a top reason for for taking the course. Obviously, learning about conservation issues and spending time outdoors are also other important reasons to the naturalist. But we're seeing new trends. If you compare natural history today and the reasons why people get into it compared to the early days of natural history, and that's understandable. We're seeing new trends and forces that are influencing why they get into natural history and what they're interested in. And I think one of the biggest ones is that today the focus it's shifted from the observation and documentation of organisms to understanding the impact of human actions, impacts such as climate change, pollution, habitat fragmentation, invasive species, biodiversity loss. Understanding these impacts on the organisms and the populations and the communities that we study. So in the early days, it was examining the organisms themselves, and now it's really looking at how our impacts on the environment are affecting those organisms. So I think that's an important trend. Another important trend is the fact that we have new digital tools, and you'll see much more about this later on in the presentation. But I wanted to highlight, this is actually a project within iNaturalist that was established by one of our staff. And this is a new project. It allows anyone that's a California naturalist to join the project. So all their future observations in California will show up within this one single broad project. And it gives us a sense of the impact of our community in this particular field in a way that we could not measure on our own. Each of our individual partners, and I'll describe those in a bit, have their own projects, but this is kind of an umbrella project for our program. So you can see the number of observations that have been made, the identifiers and the species that have been observed. Another, I think, common trend is that we're seeing people really wanting to stay engaged in this process of lifelong learning. We know that most learning takes place outside of the formal education setting, and people want to continue to learn. They want to learn socially, and this is a good opportunity for those people. Another area that's a driver for people coming into our program, and I mentioned this in one of those broad kind of categories, was this idea of early career exploration. People are looking for ways to narrow down their future academic or career paths, and exploring a 10-week natural history course in their area can be just the thing to let them know whether it's something they want to pursue more systematically and in depth or not. So we're seeing many people come into the course with that mindset. We actually have partnerships with workforce development organizations like the California Conservation Corps, and in Southern California with similar workforce entities. And we've found that this course really complements the kind of training that they're providing to their core members, and helps them as they move through their career trajectory. I think another important element is this sense of community. And I'll describe in a bit the way that our program is delivered, but it's delivered locally. And our local partners have a considerable amount of autonomy after they've met the requirements of the core curriculum to deliver the course in a way that's meaningful and relevant to not only their organization, but the populations they serve. This is just an example of one of those courses. The Wish-Toyo Foundation in Southern California, Ventura County, offers the course. They have a specific audience of Chumash members from the region as their target audience for their course. And they deliver the course in a hybrid way where they review the publication, the kind of required handbook, together orally online for several weeks. before they do a full immersion course. So they're actually doing more than what's required by the course itself, but they're doing it and they're highlighting traditional ecological knowledge, and they're basically tailoring the curriculum to the particular areas of interest that are relevant to the organization and their participants. So this is also part of building community, and this is another driving force for the program. I'm going to jump now to look at some trends that are and will continue to influence the directions that natural history go towards as we move forward. You can see some of those trends that I'm going to highlight here, but I'm just going to show you a slide with one graph, and certainly in many of these cases there are multiple graphs that kind of highlight this trend, but I'm just trying to touch base on one of these. In this case, this is a graph showing the number of peer-reviewed journals that relate to citizen science. And as I mentioned, citizen or participatory science, as we call it now, or community science, has just exploded in recent years, the interest in it from all segments of society. This is particularly important for this group of people in this picture here. This is Dr. Barrows, our lead scientist, and a group of his community volunteers. Back in 2016, he published a paper that quantified the added value of volunteer community science to field surveys of lizards in Joshua Tree National Park. And the reason he wrote that paper is because there's still, as he describes it, a cultural bias ingrained in many professional scientists against the quality of the data that volunteers collect. And if he was going to pursue this, he really needed to be sure. The study sent a pair of national park biologists to survey lizards on a half a dozen 300 by 300 meter plots. And then he brought out a group of 5 to 7 community scientists to those same plots a few days later, and together they resurveyed the plots. The results, in his words, were unequivocal. On every plot, the community scientists counted at least twice as many lizards, and did so with the same level of precision, and basically reinforcing his point that volunteer scientists that are properly trained and supervised can really contribute to this field in an effective manner. And he continues today to pursue this. He's actually done a recent restudy with this team of individuals where they walk a trail to monitor lizards and observations. And it was an interesting approach where he examined each person in the sequence, so they walked single file, each person in order tracked the number of observations that they made. And the results were interesting. Even people third and fourth in line were able to make observations that the first and second didn't see. He gives some reasons for that based on lizard behavior, but another interesting study from him. So we're very pleased to have him on board, helping us to build the case for more community and participatory science. Another trend that I think is really important is that, especially in California, seniors as a segment of our population is the fastest growing age bracket. And some research suggests that within a decade, California will have more seniors as a percentage of its population than Florida. The point here is that the majority of our participants are early retirees, and many of them are looking for ways to stay engaged. And we anticipate that this population will continue to be important to our program. So we'll continue to follow that. There's nothing new here. California is a very diverse state. What is new is the level of intensity in which organizations, whether they're environmental education organizations, natural history organizations, or others, are making efforts to engage diverse audiences in their programs. There is still so much more work to be done in this area, but we have undertaken a significant number of steps to move us forward in the California Naturalist program, and I'll describe a few of those in a bit. And as many people know, there's growing evidence that contact with the natural environment supports health and well-being. One study in particular in England showed that individuals who spent 120 minutes in nature had consistently higher levels of both health and well-being than those that reported no exposure. This is just one of many studies that are increasingly pointing to the value of exposure to the outdoors and to nature, even when they are controlling for things like physical activity. They're finding lots and lots of benefits. So I think this will continue to be a driving force to make California Naturalist program very relevant in the future. So I'm going to go through these because I have still a few slides to go into, and obviously we're not doing a discussion on climate change, but clearly, as I described, naturalists are looking now at the impacts of human actions on the organisms that they observe. And certainly climate change and the associated impacts are front and center in that regard. This one is tricky, public confidence in science. This graph shows that public confidence in science institutions, selected science institutions, has actually remained fairly steady over the years. However, there are certain science topics that there's increasing concern about public confidence in science related to those topics. And here I'm talking primarily about the safety of vaccines, climate change, and the safety of GMOs. So while in general, the studies show strong and continuing public confidence in science, I think there are some signs that this is starting to weaken in certain areas. A wide range of reasons that we don't have time to get into now, but that's another consideration for the California Naturalist program. And of course, I think relevant to all of us on this call is the loss of biodiversity for various reasons, and things that you all understand very well, and it's an important factor that will continue to make natural history relevant moving forward. And this is a national study that I'm highlighting here, and while that may not be mirrored in the state of California exactly, certainly there are significant concerns about biodiversity loss in the state. So before I move on to the next section, I just want to highlight this idea of recognizing different ways of knowing and understanding. You know, to the right are a range of you might consider them worldviews, but it's increasingly clear that we need to find ways to recognize and respect the diversity of ways of knowing and understanding, and find ways to use those worldviews, if you will, to complement our understanding of the world, and not limit ourselves or exclude different ways of knowing simply because they use a slightly different framework than we use in, say, the Western scientific viewpoint. Okay, I want to stop again here, and I'm going to go through a series of slides on the way we implement the California Naturalist program. But before I do that, I have one more short video that puts in context where this program exists. As Whitney pointed out in the introduction, the California Naturalist Program is part of UC Ag and Natural Resources, a statewide division. And very few people truly understand what that entity is. And so this video, I think, is going to provide a little bit of useful context for that. So we'll go into this real quick.
It started with a spark, a flash of inspiration. Create a system of public universities open to everyone, not just the elite. In California, that university was born on the shores of San Francisco Bay. Then came Mr. Lieber's radical idea to free the knowledge from the confines of the campus and bring practical, trusted research to
My apologies.
It started.
Get to that spot again.
Create a system, not just the elite. In California, that university was born on the shores of San Francisco Bay. Knowledge from the confines of the campus and bring practical, trusted research to the people. The first cooperative extension office opened in Humboldt County in 1913, and University of California scientists have been fanning out to communities across California ever since. As problem solvers, catalysts, collaborators, educators, and stewards. They serve, working hand in hand with growers, ranchers, and families. The face of UC, linking the people of California to their great university. We work as teams, connecting local expertise. UC Berkeley, Davis, and Riverside, 9 research and extension centers, and statewide programs. Helping growers and ranchers with advice they can trust and the environment. Enhancing markets. Benefiting all Californians with increased food safety. From the Intermountain Wreck in the far north to the desert wreck near Calexico, scientists are at work on our research and extension centers. From discovering ways to use water efficiently, to field trials for fruit and vegetables that will make their way to dinner tables around the world. From the UC Master Gardeners' advice to grow by, to 4-H Grows True Leaders. Statewide programs focus on high priorities. Whether solving a pest problem with IPM, preserving nature's bounty with the master food preservers, rebuilding a cherished habitat with the California Naturalists, or helping families eat better and move more with our nutrition educators. Our programs bring science-based solutions to everyday questions. Who does all this? We do. We are UC A&R. It started.
Thanks for your patience with that rather long commercial break, but we did want to put in a plug for the host institution. I'm going to jump now to the section on how we deliver the California Naturalist Program. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. I wanted to put up our mission of the California Naturalist Program to foster a diverse community of naturalists and promote stewardship of California's natural resources through education and service. We'll talk a little bit about that question. I see some questions coming into the chat. I'm not able to monitor all of them, but we'll have time to get back to some of those. These are the requirements that every California naturalist has to complete to become certified. 40 hours of class and field time, reading the handbook, which is this publication, the California Naturalist Handbook, doing the homework, journaling, making iNaturalist observations, participating in a class community science project, conducting a capstone project, an individual capstone project, and then completing the evaluation for the course. We have some optional things if somebody's pursuing college credits, they can avail of college credits through UC Davis Center for Professional Education. And if they want to, we highly encourage and incentivize conducting 40 hours a year of volunteer service. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. The curriculum, you can see here, the chapters from that handbook that I just showed you, it outlines kind of the core curriculum, and you can see this is a very broad curriculum that's covered in typically a 10-week course, which is kind of the standard, although there's very many variations of how the course is delivered. Most of the people we encourage to read the book in advance of the course and then just skim chapters during the course itself. But it's a very broad coverage of California natural history, kind of environment and ecology 101 for California, if you will. I did want to touch on this idea of a class participatory science project, and this is because we really have embraced participatory or community science in the California Naturalist program. We think it is a perfect match for our program, and I think the founders of the California Naturalist program were very insightful in really aligning that as an important requirement. All of our courses, the partners will create a class citizen science or community science project that they will conduct with the participants, and that links their participants to the scientific community and researchers. It engages them in a service learning activity, if you will, and in many cases those projects support the host organization that is actually offering the course. Another requirement that we have is this capstone project, which is really a culminating project at the end of the course. It combines the interest of the participant with some of the content that was covered in the course, and it gives that individual an opportunity to dive deeper into that particular area of interest and then demonstrate their competency through a presentation of their project, which should represent about 8 hours of work above and beyond the 40 hours of classroom time. These are typically presented on the last day during graduation, and all of these capstone projects have to be pre-approved in advance with the instructor, so that they know what they're pursuing. This is the delivery model that we have for the California Naturalist program, and it's really a combination of 3 different approaches. You may be familiar with kind of a train-the-trainer approach. That train-the-trainer approach is basically where we train our partner organizations and the instructors within those organizations to deliver the course with fidelity to the core curriculum and the requirements. Another element, another approach or model or aspect of our delivery model is what we call a social franchise or cost recovery model. And this essentially allows us to cover some of the costs of supporting and serving as the backbone institution for the statewide network by capturing a small amount of the participant fee that is paid to our local partners. So our local partners set their course registration fee, they collect the fee from their participants, and a small portion of that comes back to us to maintain, update the curriculum, to conduct the evaluation, to provide communication and outreach support and marketing for our partners. So that's the second part. And the third part is that we are, I think, a good example of a collective impact network, essentially a group of organizations that are working toward a shared goal. understanding that no individual organization can completely tackle that goal or that issue alone, but working together, we have an opportunity to have a broader cumulative impact on our shared goal. Right now, we've had, I think, over 56 partners that have at one point or other become part of the California Naturalist Network. I think we're at about 47 or 49 active partners now. But you can see that these three approaches comprise our program delivery model. Okay, yeah, so here are our active partners today. These are a diverse group of organizations that include museums, community colleges, botanical gardens, nature centers, research stations, land conservancies, parks and park associations, workforce development organizations, and some UC units as well. At the end of all of that, the participants become certified. We don't require recertification in our program, but we do incentivize volunteer service. And the pins that you see there are our annual service incentive pins for each year that an individual serves more than 40 hours of volunteer service. What do they do when they volunteer? We generally divide volunteer service into several categories. It can be conservation and restoration activities. It could be community science activities. It could be environmental education or interpretation, or broad program support to environmental organizations. This word cloud just highlights a few of the, I believe these is a word cloud of citizen science or community science projects that our naturalists have been engaged in over the years, taken from our volunteer management system. In terms of the numbers and outputs, I've already mentioned over 56 partner organizations have delivered over 270 courses at this time, certified close to 4,000 naturalists, and those naturalists have given more than 200,000 hours of volunteer service, which based on our calculations is worth over $6 million to the state of California. And that volunteer service touched on 51 of 58 counties in the state. And you can see again the service categories that we have there. In terms of the outcomes of the program, we don't have a content knowledge test in our evaluation or as a requirement of the course, although we do ask content questions in the evaluation survey, and people respond to that, and we're seeing that most of the participants are performing at a satisfactory level in that content knowledge. It's hard to say because many of those questions people come into the course already with some of that content knowledge, so a little bit hard to kind of ascertain how much is gained directly from the course and some is prior knowledge. We're seeing in terms of measures of their own understanding of their ability to have a positive impact on the environment, increasing significantly from pre to post. We do a retrospective pre and post evaluation survey that captures that information. And almost universally, we see a high commitment to volunteer after taking the course. Unfortunately, recording volunteer hours in the volunteer management system is another thing, but we're typically seeing over 95% commitment to volunteer after the course based on the end of course evaluation. We also think, although we don't really capture this in our evaluation, that we are increasing this science identity of our participants through community science activities and projects and other work. We think this is something that is taking place, and we're making some changes to our evaluation to try to capture that moving forward. Okay, I know this slide has a lot to it. Don't worry about the details. This is actually the theory of change that was developed for a new course that we are going to be offering. It's actually being offered right now as a pilot course in 2 locations. Early next year, it'll be rolled out more formally. This is the Climate Stewards course, which will kind of mirror in terms of the duration and the amount of content and course requirements, the California Naturalist course. But you can see here the orange boxes on the left are kind of our inputs and the content. Think of that as the content that we provide in the course and the things that we deliver in the course interactions. And then the green circles are those kind of short-term outcomes that we see in terms of knowledge and skills that are developed, self-efficacy, and other attitudes towards the environment. The orange box, I see those more as outputs, and I would put them before the green circles, but those are things that directly happen as a result of us implementing the program with our partners and them delivering the program with fidelity. Ultimately, this leads to participants that become engaged in their community and exhibit and perform stewardship behaviors. This is the volunteer service that comes out of the course. And those stewardship behaviors, we believe, are driving resilient communities and ecosystems. And so at least for the Climate Stewards course, this is the specific kind of theory of change that we've developed, but many of these elements apply as well to the California Naturalist course. So moving to this last section about opportunities and challenges moving forward. We talked, and I saw some questions in the group about addressing issues of equity, diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. We're really making a much more intentional and concerted effort than we ever have in the program to address this, primarily through our activities on the ground, but also in our larger strategic planning approaches, and even in the development of the new Climate Stewards course, which has specific content related to the topics of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. But I like to think and organize our actions in these categories of procedural equity, distributional equity, instructional equity. The source of this kind of framework is listed at the bottom of the slide, but it really makes a lot of sense. And procedural equity is being inclusive and being fair. Distributional equity is ensuring that no particular group is receiving the burdens or impacts or the benefits of any type of program. And then the structural equity issues get to those underlying institutional, systematic issues and root causes of racism and injustice in our society today. These things are high-level discussions, but at the more specific level, we're looking at training our staff and building their capacity to be more culturally competent. Looking at the relevance of the content, the marketing materials, the partners that we reach out to, making sure that it's relevant not just to people that have traditionally been attracted to natural history, but to a much wider audience in the state. Looking at relationships. Our model of program delivery really lends itself to finding partners who have existing relationships in their community with audiences and understand those audiences very well, much better than, say, we understand them in our offices in Davis or Sacramento. And these partners are able to tailor through our co-development or co-design model, where they take that content and tailor it to the needs of their audience. So that is more of a relationship building. And then finally, we're trying to improve accessibility of our program. In the past, we've already offered scholarships or partial scholarships to 25% of the participants that enroll in our courses statewide. For our events and convenings, we're using an equity pricing mechanism where we have tiers of registration fees to recognize the ability ability to pay of different communities in our community of naturalists. So these are some of the ways we're addressing this very important issue, and we'll continue to do so. I've already touched on the importance of participatory and community science. I'm not going to go into more detail here, but it is something that we think is central to the future of the California Naturalist program. I want to close on a couple of things. I want to emphasize this concept of transformative learning. If you look at some of the comments that our naturalists who graduate from the course share with us, you'll see a very clear trend and pattern. People are talking about having their eyes opened, seeing the world in a different way, seeing things that they pass by on a daily basis with new eyes, and observing things that they never noticed before. This gets to this idea of transformative learning. It's the process of becoming critically aware of how and why our assumptions have come to constrain the way we perceive, understand, and feel about our world. It's not about assimilating knowledge. It's really about challenging our existing perspective and worldviews that may constrain our ability to understand things. And when we critically examine those worldviews and we understand how they constrain our thinking, it allows us to move forward and explore new understanding. And I think this is really critical and something that we see a lot, and we want to cultivate more in our program. I think I want to kind of close on maybe this or one more slide, but the community of naturalists that we are supporting, it needs to be able to sustain itself. We can provide supporting structures like conferences and regional rendezvous and other networking opportunities and social media. But to see this continue to thrive, communities of practice within our larger community need to start to develop on their own, and we see this happening. That first video that you showed was actually a reunion of a cohort of participants from one class. Regional cohorts getting together, topical groups of people that are interested in certain things getting together. These are communities of practice that we're hoping to cultivate even more as we move forward, so that they can continue to interact and continue to learn with each other and refine their practice as naturalists. This last slide is really just to kind of reconnect again with the department. And again, I want to thank Whitney and Christina for inviting me to join. I think there are numerous ways that we can work together on a wide range of things. We are actually working with state parks to offer the climate stewards, or a version of our climate stewards training to some of their park interpreters. We know that the staff, the professional staff at the California Department of Fish and Wildlife is very professional and very well trained. We see an opportunity still, knowing that there's always an opportunity to experience more outside of our specific fields of interest, or if someone is new to California, the California Naturalist course might be useful. And then there's a whole range of opportunities where our naturalists that graduate can connect with the volunteer opportunities of the department. And some of the initiatives like the citizen science or community science projects that you all have related to, say, invasive species. So this is just a short list of potential opportunities, and I hope we can continue this discussion moving forward. And I think that's all that I have. I'll leave this slide up. I have one final slide with my contact information on it, but I'll stop there and see if I can pull up the chat. And maybe in the meantime, Whitney can let me know of any pressing questions that have come in that I might address first. I tried opening the chat, and that's what stopped that video right in the middle of the display. So don't try to open your chat and scroll through it during a video.
Well, thank you, Greg. I probably speak for many of our attendees when I say I'm ready to sign up for this course. But we do have several questions here, a few about logistics, so maybe we can kind of get through a few of those, and many of these I think you ended up addressing throughout the presentation, but I think you answered this question already about a time commitment, and what is the time commitment required to do the course and be involved. Was there anything that you didn't already cover that you'd want to say about that?
Yeah, that's a really good that's a good question, and my computer is starting to hang. Can you still hear me, Whitney?
I can. Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's a really good question. We have our course is delivered typically in the most common format is a 10-week course. So it's typically spread out over 10 weeks, usually starting in the spring or early fall. But we do have several courses that are what we call immersion courses. These are 7-day kind of intensive immersion courses, typically at a residential facility that can house the participants. I think we have right now close to 7 of our partners that offer the immersion format. And then there's a handful of kind of mixed formats for delivery, 3-day weekends over several weeks. So there's other variations. But the standard course is typically about 10 weeks in duration. And the best way to find out is to go to our website, find the course you're interested in, and on their description, it'll display the format and calendar for that.
The quick follow-up to that, we had a question about when the course is offered and what to do if you don't necessarily live near where one is offered.
So we have a calendar from our homepage on our website, and I'll provide that at the end as well. That will tell you which courses are coming up soonest. You can also search our map. If you click on the link, the menu that says Become a Naturalist, you'll get to a story map, and you can click on the map and click on individual partners. And typically, if they have a course in the next 6 months, that date will be displayed on their page, so you can see when those things will be starting. So there's multiple ways to find that information, and if all else fails, our contact information is on our website, and you can reach out to any of us for details.
Well, it sounds like this information can be found on the website as well, but I'll ask just in case you happen to know off the top of your head, Greg. Are there any program reps in the San Diego, North County area that could maybe be contacted about this?
Yes, so if you see Elliot Frutel, he is our Southern California Community Education Specialist. And I'm actually glad that you raised that question. I'm gonna skip one more slide to this last slide so you can see who our community education specialists are. Elliot is in Southern California. He's based out of Los Angeles, but covers all of Southern California to support our partners in that area. Sarah Angulo is our community education specialist for the Central Valley and the Sierra. And Brooke Gamble covers the region north of San Francisco up along the coast.
And do you know about how often throughout the calendar year the courses are offered?
No, we're offering statewide. I think we're offering around, at least prior to COVID, we were offering about 44 courses a year. So it really depends. We have, if you look at our map, you'll see we have concentrations of courses in certain areas, and in other areas, we're still trying to find a partner to offer a course. But yeah, it'll vary depending on the location. Some seem to be more saturated with partners than others, but that's one of the things we're working on to broaden our course partners in areas in the state where we don't currently exist.
And I know you mentioned tiered pricing earlier. Do you have any additional information about course costs that you could share?
Yeah, the tiered pricing, the equity-based pricing is really just for our conferences or convenings that we put on ourselves. Like I said, our partners, they dictate the price of their course. The last time I kind of computed the average cost of standard, that's non-immersion courses, it was something around the neighborhood of $380 for the 10-week course. Now, the partial scholarship cuts the cost in half. So if you have a financial need, you can get the cost at the partial scholarship rate, which is 50% of the standard cost for the course. The immersion courses tend to be much more expensive because you're typically paying for room and board as well with the course. So that's a kind of a different price structure. But I would say around $380, $385 is the average course cost for the standard 10-week course. We have some partners that are offering the course at no cost to participants, but they have to either, one, make a commitment to become a volunteer or docent with the organization, or that organization has secured a grant to cover the cost of participants, and they're typically our workforce development partners.
Let's see, I'm going to jump around a little bit and ask a couple of different types of questions. This one came in around the kind of equity and inclusion slides. Sue asks, how are you reaching communities that speak a different language and are maybe more isolated based on their language and ethnicity?
That's a great question. We actually have not internally within the program been able to develop say a Spanish language CalNet course. But because of the delivery model that I described earlier, a couple of our partners have moved forward in that direction. One of our partners in Riverside County is a urban conservation corps. They partnered with the California 4-H in the area, an advisor from California 4-H, Claudia Diaz Carrasco, and they did a bilingual course. It's still a combination of English and Spanish, but it was for participants that in that community were most comfortable speaking in Spanish and taking in the coursework. So all of the presentations, all of the guest speakers presented both in English and Spanish. So that was our first course of that nature. That was a year and a half ago. And I think they're just about to do their second or third course. So yeah, so that is starting to move forward. It's not something that's being driven necessarily from the central office, although we are extremely supportive and want to see more of it. It's through the delivery approach that we've established that allows our partners to take some control over the delivery of the course that's made that happen.
And one more along those lines, I think you've touched on this quite a bit, but the question is, has the program found ways to engage less involved segments of society, such as outdoor Afro? And I think you could have talked about this.
Yeah. So I talked a little bit about what we're doing in the program. You know, this idea of making sure that our staff have some training in cultural competency and implicit bias, that we understand the root causes of systemic and institutional racism. We look at our course content. We actually just have gone through revisions of all of our chapter slide sets to make sure we're examining the content, the images that we're using for the courses, to make sure that they're culturally relevant and sensitive. We're looking at things like, you know, the class community science projects. Many of these projects are geared towards issues that might be issues that are only relevant to certain segments of society. But there are increasingly, although still the number is relatively low, there are increasingly community science projects that are addressing issues of environmental justice, of public health. And these are the ones that are more relevant to communities that have traditionally not participated in the program. And then this whole idea of making sure that we have, as I said, partners in every part of the state that are able to serve communities in their local area. As we continue to grow, that is an important priority for us. But I'll just kind of end that because it seems like no matter what I say, I'm always really struggling because there's so much more to do. But I get a little comfort. I think it was a webinar that was looking at state parks and access to state parks that was done several months ago. And Rue Mapp was on that webinar, and she said something that really resonated with me and I found to be very true. At the very end of the presentation, when somebody was asking a question about, you know, how soon can these changes take place? She said that change in this field takes place and moves at the speed of relationships. And I thought that was telling. And it's not something that we can snap our fingers and there's some silver bullet to address it, but we have to start building relationships. And it's similar to that old adage, the best time to plant a tree was 100 years ago, the second best time is today. And the same thing with those relationships. So as we reach out to groups like Outdoor Afro, Latino Outdoors, the Community Nature Connection, and the Urban Conservation Corps, and the LACC, and all of these organizations that we start to build connections with, it will, down the road, it will start to change the way things are being done. And I think that's what we have to keep our eye on.
All right, we have a question from Mariel, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase here. It says, I just moved to the Sacramento area from Nevada, and I'm an early career environmental scientist with DFW. After living in Nevada for many years and learning the plants and ecosystems, I'd really like to develop my understanding of local plants and ecology of Northern California. I hope to one day host some community invasive species cleanups in my local park and really connect with the people who use these spaces. Given this information, is the CNP program for someone like me?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, in Sacramento, we have a long-standing, fantastic partner with the FEA Nature Center. They've been offering the course probably 8 or 9 times since the program started. Prior to COVID, they were offering 2 courses a year. They fill each of those courses. They generally have a wait list, and they have fantastic instructors and guest speakers. And it's exactly the kind of thing you described would be a perfect example of a capstone project that you might want to pursue if you took that course, kind of developing a local park, kind of maybe a community science project in your local park. So yeah, absolutely, it's a perfect fit. And while some of our partners are struggling to get back to delivering courses in a kind of an online format, others, like our community college partners, are adapting much more quickly to that because they're already in that space. So if FEA is not offering a course anytime soon, there is another partner in the area that you can look at, one of our community colleges.
And because you mentioned this, I'll go ahead and ask this question, but we had a couple of questions about potential kind of online participation or virtual programs and whether or not there's you're able to do anything to kind of accommodate for COVID.
Yeah, so thanks for reiterating and bringing that one up. It is something that we're working with our partners on. And like I said, each of our partners has a varying degree or capacity to transition to online delivery of the California Naturalist course. We are supportive of that if the partner is interested. Some of our partners really feel that the direct in-person contact is so vital. They're holding off or they're waiting to see if they can just wait until they're able to deliver the course in person again. But many, in fact, we've had several conference calls with our partners about the specific practices that they're using, alternative ways to deliver the course, whether it's through online mechanisms using learning management systems such as Canvas or Zoom calls for the presentations, like the one call we're using right now, or if they are looking at ways to substitute what was once group field activities with individual observations of the very hyper-local environment in their backyard, say, or in their neighborhood. all of our partners are exploring these different methods to deliver the course. Not all of them are currently offering the course, but they're all examining that. I would say that about probably close to half of our partners are delivering courses through alternative means during this time of COVID. So you may find, at least in the next several months, that the number of courses available are somewhat limited, but we expect that to come back up. And I appreciate you reading those questions, Whitney, because I can't, my chat screen has kind of frozen, and I'm really worried every time I click on it that something's going to hang. So if you don't mind, that's great.
Yeah, no worries. We've got just a couple of more questions here.
Okay.
This one came up, I believe, when you were showing kind of the program map. And Julie says, I didn't see any programs or partners in far Northeast California. Is there anything in the works in that area?
The closest to Northeast California would be some initial conversations we had with some potential partners in Redding, and some folks with the Lassen Volcano National Park. They're likely to be 9 months off at the earliest, but we did get some indications from several organizations in Redding that they're interested in delivering a California Naturalist course. But again, typically from the first conversation with a new potential partner to the first class, we're looking at the shortest about 6 months of time. So if that will give you a sense, but unfortunately, we don't have anything there currently.
All right, I think we have one more question. I think this will be maybe a good one to end on. James asks, how would you recommend the department reach out to extend volunteer opportunities to California Naturalist participants?
That's a great question. Different organizations do it in different ways. Probably the easiest way is to identify those local partner organizations that we work with in your area and reach out to the course instructor directly. They will know, they maintain a roster of all the participants that have gone through their courses. They have a better feeling for the specific interests of their course participants. And they could probably give you an idea of, individuals. If you're looking for something in particular, they might be able to help you target your opportunity to specific individuals and get the word out. Now, we do that as well through the central office, and you're welcome to reach out to the community education specialist for your region. It's not unusual for us to highlight volunteer opportunities through our social media, our newsletter, and things of that nature. So yeah, absolutely look at our website, find the local partner near you. The course instructor is typically listed on there. And if you reach out to the course instructor and say, I've got a volunteer opportunity for, this many people doing this type of work, do you know of anyone, or can you get the word out to your recent graduates to see if they're interested? Because people are always looking for opportunities that fit their interests and needs and capabilities. So absolutely. And if any of those avenues fail, you can contact me, and we'll find a way to get the word out for you.
Great. Well, I think we've made it through all of the questions here. So I just want to thank you again, Greg, for presenting and being a part of the lecture series. There's a lot of interest in this topic, so really appreciate you coming and giving this presentation. Before I wrap us up with just a few logistics, any last things you want to add that are top of mind, Greg, before we sign off?
No, I do want to thank you, Whitney and Christina, for the opportunity. And I think, we are very interested at this point in the California Naturalist program kind of evolution at looking at institutional partnerships so that we can systematize collaboration beyond just kind of one-off connections, which we still will do and always do. But the idea that there might be institutional opportunities to collaborate are very attractive to us. So if, for example, the way we've collaborated with the state parks to, in March, offer training using our climate stewards to a group of their interpreters at their main training facility, that's the kind of institutional arrangement that is something we're also interested in exploring. And that's entirely up to you what you find might be relevant. But like I indicated on that second to the last slide, I think there's considerable opportunities, and we're happy to sit down and discuss those. I'll end on just one recent collaboration. We offered to the California Conservation Corps a specific course for Corps members that lived at a residential camp. We partnered the residential camp in Ukiah with our CalNat course in the Hopland Research and Extension Center. They did a 7-day immersion that prevented them from being taken away from their Corps member duties for a real long period. It gave them a short time frame to get their certificate, which complements their existing training in the Corps. And now we're submitting a proposal with the Corps to expand that partnership statewide at all 10 of their residential facilities around the state, partnering them up with our local partners in those areas. So that type of institutional partnership is what's going to get us to the next level in terms of scaling up the work of the California Naturalist program, and hopefully supporting the efforts of the California Department of Fish and Wildlife as well.
Great, thank you, Greg. Perfect way to end. I think there's a real opportunity for a strong partnership there. So thank you for those comments. And with that, I do want to thank everyone for joining today and for continuing to support the lecture series. As a quick reminder, we have recorded the lecture today, and it will be available within the next couple of weeks on the Conservation Lecture Series website. So please do check that out. And with that, thank you again. Please mark your calendar for October 29th. We will see you then. Have a great day.